You know, it's really quite striking how quickly things can change on the global stage.
Hmm.
That recent terror attack in Pahalgam, it's just a very sharp reminder, isn't it, of these tensions that can just, well, boil over.
Absolutely. And it puts the spotlight on this significant development here in India.
You mean the nationwide civil defense drill?
Exactly. The
Mm.
first one on this kind of scale since, what, 1971?
That's right, since the 71 war. It feels unprecedented in modern times.
It really does. And it signals, I think, a very proactive stance towards potential threats, considering the last time was during an actual conflict. It says a lot about the current climate.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. These current events are the trigger, obviously,
Yeah.
but to really get a handle on why these drills matter now and, what we can all do.
We need some context.
Exactly. We need to look at the bigger picture. So today we're doing a deep dive into the history of air raid preparedness globally.
Looking at how different places have handled this over time.
Yeah. The idea is to understand the strategies, what worked, what maybe didn't, and how those lessons from the past might inform how we see things in India today.
Basically, how societies have organized to protect civilians when threats come from the air.
Right. What are the key elements? What can individuals do? That's our mission for this deep dive.
And history really does offer a rich playbook, doesn't it? Examining how different nations tackled this gives us critical insights, best practices, core principles, things that could be relevant right now.
So, where do we start this historical journey? Maybe the UK during World War II seems like a major case study.
Excellent starting point.
Yeah.
Yeah, the UK faced a sustained heavy threat from the air, and their response was, well, massive, and it evolved quite a bit.
And this wasn't entirely new ground for them, even in WWII, right?
Mm.
Didn't WWI have some aerial threats?
But that's a crucial point. They'd already experienced bombing raids in World War I, Zeppelins, Gotha bombers, so that awareness was there. It actually led to them forming the Air Raid Precautions Committee, the ARP, way back in the 1920s.
ARP, okay. And wasn't one of their biggest early worries gas attacks, not just bombs?
Indeed. The memory of chemical warfare from WWI was very vivid. The ARP flagged gas attacks as a major threat early on,
Which led to,
which led to the absolutely monumental task of getting gas masks
yeah,
to everyone. They figured they needed nearly 40 million for the whole civilian population.
40 million. Wow.
Yeah. And it shows you something important. Effective civil defense means thinking ahead about what kind of attack might happen and getting the protection ready beforehand.
So gas masks were part of what they called passive air defense. What else did that include?
Right. Passive, meaning ways to minimize impact without fighting back directly. So besides gas masks, you had air raid shelters, big public ones, but also individual ones like the Anderson shelter people dug in their gardens, or the Morrison shelter, like a steel cage indoors.
Evacuations, too.
Yes, huge evacuation programs, especially for children, moving them out of cities.
Mm.
And of course, the blackout.
Ah, the blackout. That must have just completely changed daily life.
Oh, profoundly. From September 1939, it was strictly enforced. Heavy curtains, shutters, even painting windows black. No light allowed to escape at night.
To make targets harder to see from the air?
Exactly. And you could be fined if you didn't comply.
Yeah.
It really shows the level of societal buy-in needed. Everyone understood their small actions had big consequences for safety.
And pulling all this together was the ARP department.
Precisely. As the threat grew in the 1930s, the government set up the Air Raid Precautions Department in 1935. Then, in 1937, they created the Air Raid Wardens Service.
The volunteers on the ground.
Yes, the local eyes and ears.
Yeah.
It really underlines how crucial early government recognition and, dedicated structures are. They built this system before the Blitz really hit hard.
They were aiming for something like 800,000 volunteers at first. That's a huge number.
It was ambitious. They didn't hit it right away, but recruitment really picked up after the Munich crisis in '38.
When war felt much closer.
Exactly. It shows how a perceived threat can really mobilize people. And these wardens became the vital link for civil defense locally. Plus, the Air Raid Precautions Act in 1937 actually required local authorities to set up their own ARP services.
So when the Blitz was happening, those heavy bombing raids, what were the wardens actually doing night after night?
Oh, they were doing everything. I mean, enforcing the blackout, obviously, making sure lights were out,
Yeah.
sounding the air raid sirens.
Getting people to shelters?
Yes, directing people to safety. They also issued and checked gas masks, though thankfully large-scale gas attacks didn't happen. But maybe their most critical role,
What was that?
reporting where the bombs hit back to Central Command,
Yeah.
calling the fire brigades, the ambulances, giving first aid on the spot.
Pulling people from collapsed buildings.
Absolutely. Rescue work. And even helping people find somewhere to stay if their homes were destroyed. They were often the very first responders in the middle of chaos.
It sounds incredibly dangerous and demanding.
It was. And their roles adapted too. They developed specialist units, messengers, often
Yeah.
Boy Scouts on bikes, riding through rubble when phone lines were down.
Wow.
First aid parties, ambulance drivers, dedicated rescue squads digging through debris, even gas decontamination teams, just in case. And later, fire guards became essential after the huge fires in London in 1940, people watching buildings around the clock.
Just incredible bravery from ordinary people.
Truly, running towards the danger when the instinct is to run away.
And they had specific ways to identify them, helmets and things.
Yeah, at first it was armbands, but later they got overalls, then proper battle dress
Yeah.
uniforms, and their helmets had letters painted on: W for warden, R for rescue, FAP for first aid party, and so on. Vital for knowing who was who in an emergency.
The scale is just mind-boggling. 1.5 million people involved by the end.
It really is. At the height of the Blitz, you had over 127,000 full-time ARP staff. It just shows the massive society-wide effort it took. And interestingly, in 1941, the name officially changed to the Civil Defense Service, reflecting that wider role.
And the lessons stuck around.
They did. Many of those roles were revived in the Civil Defense Corps during the Cold War from 49 to 68. Shows the lasting impact.
Such a comprehensive system built under extreme pressure. Okay, let's bring it closer to home now. India's own history with this. You mentioned the last big drills were in 71.
That's right. During the 1971 India-Pakistan War, even earlier, 62 and 65, air raid readiness was definitely a thing, especially in cities and border areas.
What did that look like back then?
Well, the training for civilians was pretty fundamental. Things like, how to take shelter in basic bunkers if available, or even digging trenches, finding reinforced spots in buildings.
Simpler times, perhaps, but practical measures.
Exactly. And blackouts were a major feature too. Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, Chennai, border towns, they all experienced blackouts during those wars.
I remember hearing about specific rules for cars during blackouts.
Yes, very specific. Headlights had to be covered, often with brown paper. Like one layer on the bottom half, two layers on the top half, just letting a dim light shine downwards. Enough to see a little, but hard to spot from the air.
And people practiced this. There were drills.
Oh yes, mock drills were held. I've read accounts from Bombay in 71, schools doing drills where kids practiced sheltering in the church when the bell rang, simulating a siren.
Like fire drills today, but for air raids?
Sorta, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And in Delhi, people dug trenches outside apartment blocks for quick shelter. The aim was to build preparedness, reduce panic if the real thing happened.
Interesting parallels with the UK, even decades later. Okay, now let's shift to a place where this threat isn't just historical, but persistent. Israel.
Israel is a really compelling example of long-term, ingrained preparedness. Their civil defense law from 1951 actually mandates bomb shelters in all new homes and apartment buildings.
So it's literally built into the country's fabric.
It is. It reflects this understanding that the threat is, well, enduring. And it's not just the physical shelters.
There's training too.
Decades of it. Israelis are constantly educated on how to react instantly to sirens. It's a deeply ingrained response. You saw how crucial that was in conflicts like the '82 Lebanon War, people spending long periods in shelters. It really drives home the need for both infrastructure and constant public education.
Infrastructure and knowledge working together. Now, a much more recent ongoing conflict, Ukraine. What can we learn from their civil defense efforts right now?
Ukraine's experience is fascinating because it shows how civil defense has to adapt to modern realities. Yes, traditional shelters are still vital, but they've put huge emphasis on keeping essential services running through digitalization.
You mean like banking, healthcare?
Exactly. Financial services, health records, even education, keeping them accessible online despite massive physical disruption. It shows how civil defense is evolving in the digital age, protecting not just lives, but the functioning of society itself.
It's clear there's a whole spectrum of approaches depending on the time, the place, the threat. So let's bring it back to India today. We know the Air Force has its role.
Right, the detection and interception side. Advanced radar to spot hostile objects entering airspace, analyzing speed, trajectory.
Figuring out where the danger zones are.
Exactly. And then activating the air raid sirens in those specific areas, hopefully giving people crucial seconds or minutes to react before impact. And of course, launching interceptors like surface-to-air missiles to try and neutralize the threat.
And for us, the public, understanding those sirens is step one, isn't it? What do they sound like in India?
Absolutely critical. So the main warning siren, the one that means take cover now, is typically a wailing sound. It goes up and down, usually for about 1 to 3 minutes.
Okay, wailing means danger.
Right. Then the all clear signal is usually a single continuous tone lasting for about a minute. That means the immediate danger has passed. Knowing the difference is key.
So you hear that wailing sound. What are the official recommendations? What should people do?
The first thing is move to a safe place immediately. If you're out in public, maybe a crowded area, they advise heading for a subway or an underpass. Those offer good protection.
What if you're in an open area, like a park?
Under a low flyover is suggested as offering some immediate cover if you're already inside a building.
Stay away from windows.
Definitely.
Mhm.
Move away from main entrances, windows on all sides, and any walls that are just single layer. Look for reinforced areas. Bathrooms often have stronger structures or the space under staircases.
Okay. And what else? Turn things off?
Yes. Turn off gas and electrical appliances if you can do it quickly. Close all windows and doors.
Mhm.
Then get low. Lie down on the ground and cover your head.
And having an emergency kit ready seems like a good idea.
Highly recommended. Basic food, water, first aid supplies, kept somewhere you can grab it easily, and maybe the most important thing,
What's that?
stick to official information. Follow government guidelines only. Don't rely on rumors or social media chatter that just creates panic.
Very practical advice. Thinking back to the UK again, that sense of community preparedness feels really important. Checking on neighbors, volunteers. Could that model apply in India?
I think the principle absolutely applies. That collective responsibility.
Hmm.
Checking on vulnerable neighbors, elderly people, those with the mobility issues, that's huge.
We saw how vital volunteers were in the UK, didn't we?
Immensely.
Mhm.
From enforcing blackouts to rescue work and educating kids about what to do is crucial everywhere. It just builds that resilience across the whole community. And trying to stay calm yourself helps everyone else stay calm too.
Which brings us to the psychological side of this. These drills, the heightened tensions. It naturally creates anxiety, doesn't it? We saw that back in 71, too.
That's a really critical point.
Hmm.
The mental toll of living under a potential threat is significant. Accounts from past conflicts like 71 make that clear, the uncertainty, the fear.
So the drills aren't just about physical actions.
No, not at all. They're also about psychological preparation. Practicing the procedures helps reduce panic if something real happens. It gives people a sense of agency, something they can do in a situation that feels chaotic. Familiarity breeds confidence, or at least reduces sheer terror.
Okay, so as we sort of wrap up this deep dive, what are the main things you, our listener, should take away from all this history and these current measures?
I think the biggest thing is just the importance of being proactively prepared and aware. Understanding the potential risks, knowing the basic safety steps, that's fundamental.
Knowledge is power, in a sense.
It really is. And while looking at the UK or Israel or other places gives us valuable context and ideas.
The specific advice for India is what matters most now.
Absolutely. When it comes down to it, you need to follow the specific guidelines issued by the Indian government authorities for your area. That's the most crucial information in an emergency.
That's a really vital reminder. Official guidance first. And it really highlights that national safety isn't just about the military, is it? It involves everyone.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Think about the role each individual plays in this bigger picture. A nation's resilience, especially in uncertain times, it really comes down to the preparedness of its communities, of its people.
So the final thought maybe is,
Get familiar with your local civil defense guidelines, if they're available. Participate if there are awareness drives. Because it's that collective effort, that community strength that ultimately builds the strongest security for everyone.